Hi, everyone. Thanks for checking out our fourth webinar in this six-webinar series. In this webinar, we will be talking about a plant-based dietary pattern for weight management in elite athletes. My name is Abby Lears. I'm currently a graduate student at Concordia College in Moorhead, Minnesota. I did my graduate capstone research on weight management practices in elite athletes. So I'll just be sharing the research that is out there and available on a plant-based dietary pattern for weight management in the athlete population. Our learning objectives are to be able to define a plant-based eating pattern in terms of weight management. Objective 2, understand the reasons why elite athletes may be interested in using a plant-based eating pattern to assist with weight management. And objective 3, be aware of the research that is currently available on the use of a plant-based eating pattern to assist with weight loss, weight maintenance, and weight gain. So just to clear up what a plant-based eating pattern is, overall, it just emphasizes eating fresh or minimally processed foods while either limiting or totally excluding meat, eggs, and dairy. So there are varying degrees of plant-based eating. It spans all the way from veganism, which is the most strict, if you would call it that, of the plant-based eating forms. So this means totally excluding meat, eggs, dairy, possibly even honey. And then it goes to vegetarianism. There are multiple forms of vegetarianism, but the most common would be that excluding meat products. And then it can also just be limiting animal-based food products. That can be a plant-based eating pattern. So, not totally excluding meat or animal products from one's diet, but just trying to limit overall consumption. So, why might elite athletes be interested in a plant-based eating pattern? Overall, there are many documented health benefits, such as chronic disease prevention associated with plant-based eating. People may be interested in following a plant-based eating pattern for environmental reasons, ethical reasons, philosophical, religious or spiritual, aesthetic, and then general well-being. So kind of why it ties in to weight loss specifically is that vegan and vegetarian diets typically contain more high fiber and low energy dense foods that can contribute to satiety, which ultimately could assist with weight loss. So athletes already who are needing to lose weight may be encouraged to select these whole unprocessed foods to assist weight loss. So eating a plant-based eating pattern, which already, has more of those low energy dense foods, high fiber foods, may be of interest then to an athlete. To start, we're going to look at the research available on a plant-based eating pattern for weight loss. So, a systematic review published in 2020 by Tran and colleagues evaluated 19 studies, all which assessed the effects of different plant-based diets on weight and BMI. So, results from this review found that plant-based diets may improve weight status in some patient groups. However, none of these studies observed these effects in athlete populations, and there are no other studies that have examined the effects of a hypocaloric plant-based diet on weight status in elite athletes. Therefore, our key takeaways for a plant-based eating pattern for weight loss is we really need to ensure adequate amounts of vitamins and minerals. So, especially when we're thinking of, a vegetarian or a vegan diet that's totally either excluding animal-based products and all meats, we need to think of those vitamins and minerals such as iron, calcium, vitamin D, iodine, vitamin B12, and riboflavin. So really just want to make sure athletes are still getting in adequate amounts of these, either through food or possibly even supplementation. And then want to point out that entities of plant-based eating should be proceeded with caution in athletes who have had a history of disordered eating, just because vegetarianism can be a socially acceptable way to restrict intake. And then, even though plant based diets have been associated with several health benefits in the general public and several patient groups, more research is needed to really understand the effects of a hypocaloric plant based diet on body composition, performance, and nutrient intake in elite athletes. Next up, we will look at the research on a plant based eating pattern for weight maintenance. So, there's a little bit more research out there in the athlete population for weight maintenance and a plant based eating pattern. Our first study we're going to look at is that top one by Lynch and colleagues. This was published in 2016, and these researchers sought to discover the effects of a vegetarian diet compared to an omnivore diet, so eating both plant and animal products, on adult endurance athletes' body composition and performance. So, 57 endurance athletes, both males and females, omnivores and vegetarians, participated in this cross sectional study. This study was only done on one day. So, all tests were completed on one day. Therefore, energy intake, macros, and resistance training details were not specified, as it was not controlled or a long term intervention study. So, the only energy intake that was looked at was that these participants completed a 7-day food log prior to the testing day, and this was analyzed via nutrition software program. On this testing day, body composition was measured via full body DEXA scan, and then maximal oxygen uptake was measured according to the Bruce protocol on a treadmill using a metabolic measurement system. Also, participants performed a series of leg extensions and flexions where they completed 3 maximal effort repetitions. So, data for this study was analyzed via two-way ANOVA to detect differences between diet groups. And then, in addition to this, an independent t-test was run to analyze diet within gender. So, researchers found that the vegetarian diet group had comparable strength and significantly higher maximal oxygen uptake when compared to the omnivore diet group. This difference in oxygen uptake was predominantly seen in female participants. When looking at body composition, the vegetarian group did have significantly lower body mass and lean body mass when compared to their omnivore counterparts. However, I want to mention that this difference in body mass and lean body mass did not render reduced strength levels as measured by that peak torque on the leg extension. Switching our focus then to their intake, based on these participants' 7-day food logs, both diet groups did have similar caloric intake and fat intake. It was observed that the vegetarian diet group had a significantly higher intake of dietary carbohydrates, fiber, and surprisingly iron when compared to the omnivore group. On the other hand, the omnivore group had significantly higher intakes of dietary protein, saturated fat, cholesterol, and vitamin B12 compared to the vegetarian group. However, although the omnivore group had higher overall intakes of protein, when protein was actually expressed relative to body mass, there were no differences found between the group's dietary protein intake. Therefore, researchers concluded that based on their findings, following a vegetarian diet may adequately support strength and cardiorespiratory fitness development and possibly may be advantageous for supporting cardiorespiratory fitness. So that was our first study. The next one was published a few years later by Nebel and colleagues. So this was in 2019. This study looked at the exercise capacity of vegan, lacto-ovo vegetarian, which is a diet that includes both eggs and dairy products, and then omnivorous recreational runners. So this cross-sectional design study looked at 24 vegan runners, 26 lacto-ovo vegetarian runners, and then 26 omnivorous runners. There was equal distribution of men and women. Again, just like the other study we examined, all the tests for this study were completed in one day. And unlike the other study, though, that did a 7-day food log, this study only did a 24-hour dietary recall prior to the testing day. This dietary recall was analyzed for nutrient and energy intake. So on the testing days, body composition was measured via bipolar bioelectrical impedance analyzer. Exercise capacity was assessed via a graded exercise test on a bicycle ergometer that measured maximum power related to body weight, maximum power output related to lean body mass, and then submaximal lactate and glucose concentrations. These were measured via blood samples taken via the subject's earlobe. For our data analyses, a one-way ANOVA was conducted to examine differences between the three groups. And then outcomes from this study, Neville and colleagues found that there were no significant differences in maximum exercise capacity and glucose utilization between the vegan, lacto-vegetarian, and omnivorous groups. So this is actually opposite to what Lynch and colleagues, the top study, found in their results. So we're going to compare these two studies here because, again, they had different findings about whether a plant-based diet had beneficial effects on performance in endurance athletes. However, they did have different methodologies that we're going to go into to kind of examine why their results may have differed. So Lynch and colleagues, the top study we saw in that last slide, examined VO2 max and exercise was performed on a treadmill. Whereas Neville and colleagues did not measure VO2 max and exercise was performed on a bicycle. Both of these were listed as limitations. This is because not determining that oxygen uptake did not provide the insight into the efficiency of subjects' cardiorespiratory fitness during physical activity like Lynch's study did. Also, using a bicycle to measure maximum exercise capacity rather than a treadmill was a limitation just because the subjects of this study were runners. So it may have affected their results. So even Neville in their study noted that their results could not be compared to Lynch's just because they did have such different methodologies. But that brings us to our next slide, which makes it not clear whether following a plant-based dietary pattern is beneficial to an athlete's performance or not. However, what we can infer from these studies is that a plant-based dietary pattern does not have negative effects on an athlete's performance. So again, we don't know whether or not it can enhance performance, but to our knowledge, it will not have negative effects. Again, we want to ensure adequate amounts of vitamins and minerals. And then ultimately, we do need more long-term intervention studies to get a better understanding of how a plant-based dietary pattern would affect athletes' body composition and performance. So, although we commonly think of plant-based diets more in the context of weight loss and weight maintenance, some athletes may want to use a plant-based eating pattern for weight gain. However, there's currently no studies available that have examined the effects of a plant-based diet on weight gain in either the general public or the elite athlete population. What we can take away, though, from a plant-based eating pattern for weight gain is that it may be more challenging for elite athletes who have those high energy needs, especially when needing to gain weight, to meet their energy and nutrient needs, just because a plant-based eating pattern is commonly more having more intake of those low energy dense foods and high fiber foods, which can contribute to early satiety. So what we can do is recommend frequent meals and snacks, again, trying to select high energy dense foods rather than low energy dense foods. So thinking those healthy fats such as avocados, nut butters, olive oils, while limiting fiber rich foods to, again, prevent early onset of satiety. So, in conclusion, again, when we take it all together, research is lacking regarding the effects of a plant based eating pattern on elite athletes' performance and body composition. However, from the results that we do have from the studies available, it appears that a plant based eating pattern will not have a negative impact on performance. However, whatever degree of plant-based eating the athlete is following, we need to ensure that they're still getting adequate amounts of vitamins and minerals. Especially of concern is that iron, calcium, vitamin D, iodine, B12, and riboflavin. So Last point here too, although a plant-based eating pattern is more common for weight maintenance and weight loss, some athletes may want to use it for weight gain. And although it may be more challenging, there are strategies we can take to kind of help them get those adequate calories and nutrients that they need. As always, if you have any questions, please contact me at my email, addison.lears99@gmail.com. And then here is my reference page. Feel free to look through any of these resources to get some more information on the studies that have been conducted. And then we have our webinar assessment tool. When you're ready, press pause. You can write down or type down your answers to these 5 questions. Once you're ready, then press play and it will take you to the end of this webinar, which will end on the webinar assessment tool answer key. Thanks for listening today. Have a great rest of your day. And don't forget to watch the next webinar in this webinar series that discusses a high energy dense diet and a low energy dense diet for weight management.